Welcome to episode 21, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today. So, lately I've been interviewed on several podcasts about my poetry book, Words Never Spoken, a poetry journal for healing. And I thought it would be helpful for all of my poetry writers out there to share some helpful tips from those interviews. So today I'm going to be discussing 5 points: how I define poetry, what poem changed my life, my poetry writing process, what we can all learn from poetry, and 5 final tips for writing poetry. I know everyone may define poetry differently, and I do encourage everyone to share in the comments. But for me, poetry is a language in a class by itself, a language that can speak love, hate, it can admonish or advocate for a cause. It's a form of storytelling broken into various lines and symbols that may or may not rhyme. The reader can both visualize and feel as they read. And writing poetry teaches us to write what we are thinking and feeling, even though we may be afraid to speak it aloud. So I want to hear from you. Tell me how you define poetry. I was in the 11th grade. The auditorium was still and silent. The curtains opened, and there I was, the only one on stage, sitting in front of a mirror at a dressing table. I was in a theater production of A Raisin in the Sun. My role was to pretend to put on makeup and brush my hair while I recited the poem A Dream Deferred, written by Langston Hughes. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Such a powerful memory of being on stage and watching the audience's face as I recited each verse, as if they understood Hughes' meaning and felt his pain and struggle through my words. Although they may have been slightly prejudiced, my parents and family members praised my performance, saying how believable I was. Number one, I never write at my desk. I sit in silence with a pen and paper, and usually it's on the couch or the bed. If I try to type on a laptop, it's not the same experience for me. Even when I'm journaling, I have to be in that type of environment. I can't listen to music. I have to write in silence. So that's my personal preference. Tell me about yours. Dig deep to find something that has profound meaning for you. It doesn't always have to be about a broken relationship. It could be a painful memory from childhood or a principle you feel passionate about, that you passionately believe in, but something that evokes a great deal of emotion for you. Next, you want to begin with a harsh truth for the shock effect, but use metaphors. You don't always have to say what you actually feel. If you use metaphors, it allows the reader to interpret the line the way they want to interpret it based on their experience. So, for example, love shattered me into shards of glass. Let the mirrored life of bad luck begin. Okay, next up, create verses that have rhythm, which is why I think that reading your verses aloud is vital. If you read the lines in Words Never Spoken, you'll notice that there's a rhythm to it. It might be two lines that are long, and then the last third line is just a few words. That gives a lot of dramatic impact to the verses, and there is a rhythm to it because you're always going to be maybe sometimes repeating that same last line over and over again. And then lastly, leave the reader wondering. Allow them again to interpret the story their own way. Everyone has different experiences, and so they're going to make it fit their story. 3 things that everyone can learn from poetry. Number 1, writing poetry can be self-care, just like exercise, therapy or counseling, reading a book, or journaling, or disconnecting from electronics for a certain period of time. Number 2, everyone interprets verses differently, so there's no right or wrong answer. There's no right or wrong interpretation. And number 3, poetry does not have to rhyme. So I've learned over the years that a lot of folks thought that poetry had to rhyme. And then all of a sudden we had this wonderful era where spoken word poetry came out. And that's what influenced me to write Words Never Spoken using similar styles. Let's look at the 5 things that a poet needs to know to create beautiful and evocative poetry. So number 1, dig deep to find something that has profound meaning to you. So I'm asking you to get uncomfortable. If you are not uncomfortable when you are writing, then dig deeper. Okay? Number 2, start with the harsh truth. Okay? You want the shock effect. Just give it to them in the first line. Put it all out there. This is what grabs their attention. And then number 3, you're going to create those verses that have a rhythm. And I'm going to share an excerpt from my book as an example. Okay, so this excerpt is going to be from Lonely Together, page 54. So it's showing you the rhythm with the repeating of one specific line over and over again at the end of each verse. Sitting in church with baby girl, waiting for you to walk in with your fine self. I knew better than to hold my breath. The end is near. Sleeping back to back, front to front, don't really matter. I was still a expletive to him anyway. The end is near. I had many names. Baby girl did too. Won't repeat them for you. Ain't trying to give ammo to the next guy. The end is here. So that's just kind of an example of the verses and how you can create your own rhythm. Okay, next up, number 4, say what you mean, but don't say what you mean. So in my book, Words Never Spoken, I shared bits and pieces of some very painful moments in my life, and there were things that I had not even shared with my closest friends or family. But with the use of metaphors, I was able to craft those stories in a way that was healing to me and hopefully to the reader as well. So if we look at Fighting Back on page 51, just that first verse, I'm able to use metaphors to capture the reader's attention. So it was days before the deed. Episodes of CSI run through my head. I was becoming the two faces of evil. Damn. So you don't really know what's going to happen. Is this woman planning on committing murder or killing him or something else? Maybe it doesn't mean, the deed doesn't mean anything, negative, so you're able to interpret it in many different ways. And it's just another example of how to use metaphors. So number 5 is leave the reader wondering. You want to allow them to interpret the story their own way. And I have an example. So this is just some verses I wrote. It's not in a poem in the book. The ways of the wicked run wild. They will not let me be. My heart burns with a raging fire as the horses run free, seemingly a gate that can never be mended. So these verses are leaving you wondering, are you talking about horses and running through a gate and breaking free? Probably not. We're talking about maybe a love relationship. Is the raging fire something that they'll be able to eventually tame? So there's a lot of different questions in there. So the final point I want to say again is, to be a poet, you need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. It's so important. If you are not uncomfortable, dig deeper. Until next time, episode 22. Hope to see you there. Thank you. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks. Bye.